Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us tonight. We welcome to Protecting Chicago Students in Schools Amid Federal Threats. My name is Hal Woods. I'm the Chief of Policy at Kids for Chicago. And on behalf of Kids for Chicago, I want to thank you here for being here for this important conversation. We are incredibly grateful to our partners who've helped make this event possible. We have the Resurrection Project, Advance Illinois, and Educators for Excellence Chicago. Their partnership has been key in pulling this all together. Some of you may have joined us for our first program on May 13th, where we explored the broader federal landscape and the growing challenges facing public education. If you missed it, don't worry. We will share the recording and the resources after tonight's event. We've got a powerful program lined up for you all this evening. It features educators, parents, and advocates who are living these issues every day. So thank you again for making the time to be here, and let's go ahead and get started. So we're going to take a quick look at what we'll be covering here tonight. We'll start with a short overview of why this conversation matters right now, especially for families and schools here in Chicago. Then we'll dive into our two focus areas. First, we're going to hear a presentation and panel on how recent immigration actions, like increased enforcement, legal changes, and rollbacks of protections, are affecting students and families across the city. Next, we'll shift to the federal attack on CPS's Black Student Success Plan and what that means for efforts to support Black students in our schools. After each panel, we'll pause for a quick interactive poll so we can hear you, so we can hear from you, what's resonating, what concerns you most, and what we should take forward all together. And finally, we'll wrap up with some closing reflections and let you know how to stay connected and stay involved. Thank you again for being here. It means a lot. All right, so before we dive into the details, we want to pause for a moment and talk about why this conversation is so important. The two issues that we're about to explore, federal immigration actions and the attacks on race-conscious education, aren't just issues happening in Washington, D.C. They're showing up in our schools, our neighborhoods, and our lives in very real ways. So as we move into these next sections, we hope that you'll listen not just with your head, but also with your heart, and think about how these federal threats are landing here in Chicago and what it means for our students. So let's start with immigration. What we're seeing right now is an escalation in enforcement into places that used to be considered off limits. Schools, churches, these were once spaces where families could count on for safety, and that's no longer the case. And that shift alone is creating a wave of fear. At the same time, the federal government is trying to dismantle critical protections like temporary protected status, and there's even been talk about challenging birthright citizenship. That means thousands of CPS students and their families are at risk of being separated. And we're already seeing the ripple effects. In January, after major announcements from the Trump administration, CPS saw attendance drop sharply in schools with high numbers of immigrant students. Counselors and principals are also reporting increased anxiety and emotional stress among kids, some of whom are now scared to even show up for school. These federal actions are hitting classrooms and communities in Chicago right now. Now let's turn to Chicago's Black Student Success Plan. So the plan is about targeting real, measurable gaps. It sets clear goals, like doubling the number of Black male teachers in CPS, cutting suspensions for Black students by 40%, and making sure every classroom is teaching in ways that reflect and respect Black history and culture. But just weeks after the plan was released earlier this year, it came under attack. A conservative group filed a complaint claiming discrimination, and now the federal government is investigating it, citing the Supreme Court's decision in the Harvard affirmative action case. We're already seeing how this has played out elsewhere. In Los Angeles, a similar initiative called the Black Student Achievement Plan was reshaped under federal pressure. The district removed race as a factor altogether. The result was resources that were meant to close gaps for Black students got spread even thinner, and community trust took a hit. So what's at stake in Chicago? Everything. Backing away from this plan or watering it down would risk setting back progress in some of the most persistent disparities in our district, in graduation, in discipline, and in college access. So these are gaps that we've lasted for generations, and we can't afford to pause now. So that's just a little bit framing for tonight. So before we get into the content, we would love for you to take just a minute to complete a quick opening survey. This will help us understand where everyone is starting from, what you already know, what you're concerned about, and how you're thinking about these issues. It's completely anonymous, and we'll share what we can learn from the group later in the webinar. You can scan the QR code on the screen to get started, or you can click the link that we just dropped into the chat. We'll give everyone about a minute or so to fill it out before we keep moving. Thanks again for taking the time to do it. It really is going to help us. I am now honored to welcome Martha Armenta Robles, who is a Senior Program Manager for Immigrant Justice and Partnerships at the Resurrection Project. The Resurrection Project has been leading efforts across Chicago to protect immigrant families from harmful federal actions. Martha is going to walk us through the key immigration developments shaping the daily reality for Chicago students and families. She will also be moderating the panel discussion immediately following her presentation. We are incredibly grateful to have her guiding this important part of tonight's conversation. Martha, I will turn it over to you.
Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me. Super thankful to be part of today's webinar and the panel. I'm going to try my best to cover as much as I can from the presentation. At the end of the PowerPoint, there will be resources where you could follow up with anything that I might have not touched on during this presentation. And I know that the presentation and materials will be sent out via email as well. So we could get started. If you could go to the first slide, please. We will be talking about a few things today regarding immigration. As I mentioned, it's a lot going on all the time since the Trump administration started. The area of focus for this evening will be talking about how there's increase in border security, restrictions on legal immigration, and that could look like with DACA being attacked, TPS ending, increased enforcement around the communities. You've probably seen ICE raids or heard about them in the community. And the ways that these policies are being carried out right by the current administration looks like criminalizing immigrants, expanding power, enforcing compliance. Go to the next slide, please. And first, we're going to talk about Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals that we call DACA. It started back in 2012. The administration has not made changes to the program officially. DACA does continue in the courts. Right now, new applications are being accepted, but USCIS has not processed any or issued any guidance, which means that they take the payments and they take the application, but nothing is granted or processed. You don't get anything but like a receipt notice that they got your application. Renewals for current DACA recipients continue. All renewals should be between the 120 to 150 days before the expiration date. If DACA has expired, you could still renew. If your DACA has been expired for less than 1 year, you can file as a standard renewal. However, if your DACA has been expired for more than 1 year, you will need to apply as a first-time applicant. And as I mentioned right now, first-time applicants, the applications are being accepted but not processed. You can go to the next slide. The next thing we're going to talk about is temporary protected status for 2 designated countries, which is Haiti and Venezuela. There's different countries that are designated with TPS, but because of the short time for this presentation, we're only covering Haiti and Venezuela. For Haiti, the extension was shortened in February of this year, February 20th, before the TPS was covered for 18 months for individuals. Right now it's 12 months only. The TPS protection will now end on August 3rd of this year. And technically, initial registrations for new applicants, it is open to August 3rd, but that's also the date that it's going to end. No new TPS documents will be issued with the August 3rd, 2025 date for those who already received February 3rd, 2026 expiration dates. Can you go to the next slide? And now TPS for Venezuela, TPS extension revoked for Venezuela. The Trump administration attempts to cancel last extensions under the Biden administration. The current TPS status, and remembering these days is really important, right? If you apply before October 3rd of 2023 under the 2021 designation, TPS will be valid to September 10th of 2025, and then auto extended to April 2nd of 2026. If someone applied after October 3rd of 2023 under the 2023 designation, it is only valid into October 2nd of 2026. This is a recent update right on May 19 of 2025. The Supreme Court ruled that it will allow the Trump administration to end temporary protected status programs for Venezuelans. The decision only impacts 2023 designations for TPS for Venezuelans, not the one from 2021. And then the Department of Homeland Security has not issued any guidance as of yet of how that's going to look like or what people could apply for or not. Next slide, please. And now we're going to be talking about humanitarian parole, right? There's different types. And the first one is Uniting for Ukraine, which is also known as U4U parole program. And that one is still in effect. Some folks under the U4U program received emails incorrectly stating that their parole was terminated. The DHS has confirmed that those messages were sent in error and that the U4U program is still valid. However, the parole for Cuban, Haitian, Nicaraguan, and Venezuelans, also known as CHNV parole program, its termination is on hold. The CNHNV parole program has been officially terminated and people were told that they must leave by April 24, 2025. However, on April 14 of 2025, a U.S. judge put this termination on hold while a lawsuit moves forward. So if you know any community members, families that pertain to this parole program, please share the link on this presentation that they could join the class action lawsuit and know about any court developments that might be going on with the case. Next slide, please. Another thing to know about humanitarian parole, and I'm sure everyone heard on the news that the CP1 app was ended when the Trump administration took over. It was a process that dozens of folks used to enter the country legally under the CP1 app. Some people who enter with the CP1 app are getting letters stating again that their permission to stay under parole is ending and they have 7 days to leave the US. If you apply for something else like TPS or asylum, or if you know of any family members, community members that know that came in with parole, but then applied to asylum or TPS, know that that process continues because it's a separate application. The end of parole does not cancel your other applications. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, now we're going to be talking about executive orders, and I'm sure everyone has heard on the news that there's executive order after executive order that Trump has, I think it was more than 112 in the first 3 months that he was in office. A lot of those executive orders have been challenged in court, and we're thinking that this is going to be a common theme for this administration. For those folks that might not know, an executive order is a directive issued by the President of the United States to manage and direct the operations of the federal government. It cannot override existing laws passed by Congress, and it can face legal challenges in the courts. Next slide, please. One of the things that we have heard a lot about is birthright citizenship, right? And this is aimed to end birthright citizenship for children born in the US to non-legal residents. This executive order was issued on January 20th. The federal government will no longer recognize US citizenship for babies born on US soil after February 19 of 2025. That is what is written in the executive order. Citizenship will only be granted if at least one parent is a legal permanent resident or a US citizen. However, as you know, this is being challenged in court. Right now, anyone that is born in the US or US soil, they are a citizen. And if you might have heard on the news a couple of weeks ago, the Supreme Court was hearing arguments regarding this. However, the Supreme Court case is not debating if this is constitutional or not, but they're rather if courts can be put a nationwide injunction on executive orders. That's what the Supreme Court arguments focus on. And we expect to hear back from the Supreme Court sometime in June or July of this year. Next slide, please. Another executive order that was issued on January 20th of this year was something called Protecting the American People Against Invasion Act. And basically what this executive order does is it expands the use of expedited removal. And expedited removal is when community members don't get the opportunity to present their case in front of a judge in court. And usually if someone has a convicted felony, if you have been previously deported and came back into the country, if you have been in the US for less than 2 years, it's usually you fall under that expedited removal. And a lot of it is denial of federal funding to sanctuary jurisdictions like the state of Illinois, like the city of Chicago, implementation of criminal and civil penalties for undocumented immigrants failing to register. And the immigration registration is something that is covered in our website that I will share the resources for at the end of the presentation. And we have like FAQs that you could read if you want to know more about the immigration registration, which was another executive order. Next slide, please. And it continues talking about the protecting the American people against invasion. It does include the increased hiring of immigration and custom enforcement and custom and border protection agents, restricted access to public benefits for undocumented immigrants, and then the expansion of the 287G agreements, which that agreement enables local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration laws. And two things important about this, right? In Illinois, there are no agreements between local law enforcement and federal immigration laws under the sanctuary laws that the state of Illinois has and Chicago has as a sanctuary city as well. And also another thing with this, protecting the American people against invasion, it allows other federal agencies like the FBI, US Marshals, the Postal Office, right? Any federal agency is able to help or work with ICE if they desire to do so. And another thing that will come up in the next week that we'll be posting about is the IRS working with ICE and what data they're able to provide if they ask for it or not. It wasn't ready for this presentation, but it will be ready by the end of the week in our website. Next slide, please. And next slide. Deportations, right? You can fight a deportation. In most cases, deportation is not automatic. You may be eligible for relief, asylum, cancellation of removal, etc. It is highly, highly important that you connect with a legal service provider or a community organization that works in immigration that you trust. We have seen a lot of different fraud happening with like notaries, notarios, right, in the community that take advantage of community members who might not know who to trust. So it's highly important that you go to a legal service provider or community organization that you do trust. It is highly important that you know your rights, to attend a training that the Resurrection Project, ICER, and countless of other organizations offer Know Your Rights training, where you learn all your rights, you learn where to look for resources. And finally is to have a plan, right? Create a family safety plan to figure out if someone is deported in the family, who's gonna pick up the kids, or if someone is deported, how do you protect your assets, right? If you own a house, if you own a car or anything like that, it's highly important to have a plan. Next slide, please. And this is the slide that I was talking about with the links that they are highly important for you to have. And I'll review them really quick. And the first one is, it goes in that information about guardianship and power of attorney and more. And that's the Illinois Legal Aid website and the links on the presentation. And the last two is the Resurrection Project Immigrant Justice website that covers everything that you saw in this presentation is also on our website and more, right? Like things, FAQs on different executive orders that are happening. You could request a training, a Know Your Rights training for your staff, for your community members, for your students on this website. And then the second website is a new website that just launched about 2 to 3 weeks ago, and it's partnerships with the state of Illinois, with IDHS and different organizations like ICER, and it's called the Illinois Immigration Information, but it's like Illinois Immigration info.org. And that one is a place that we wanted to create where we could send community members to get factual information, a place where anyone could click and you'll find FAQs, you'll find any resources that you might need. And that one is available in about, I think, 7 to 8 different languages that you could change the setting into. So those two are very different, very important. And one last thing I forgot to mention about the TRP Immigrant Justice website, if someone you know is detained by ICE, you could report that there for them to get legal assistance. It's a form called a loved one was detained. It's really important to get legal representation when someone is detained, and that is a great resource on there. And you could also report any ICE activity in the website for people to confirm that it is ICE in the community, to prevent so much misinformation about ICE being in the community, to prevent it to being spread. I think that's about it. Hopefully I didn't go over 15 minutes.
You were great. Thank you, Martha. And Martha's going to stay on. She's actually going to be moderating our panel. We're going to hear from a parent as well as an educator, but Martha, I'll let you introduce them both. Thank you.
Yeah, so I guess you guys are stuck with me a little longer. Happy to to be in this panel. Happy to be moderating the impact of immigration actions on Chicago students. And I would love to, I'm so happy to introduce Alma and Juan, who I have the pleasure of knowing both of them. And I'll start with Alma. Alma Duran is a proud Mexican, originally from the state of Aguascalientes, and has called Chicago home for more than 20 years. She's a mother of 3 children, 2 of whom currently attend Chicago public schools. Alma began her journey in parent leadership in 2017 as a volunteer with the Parent Mentor Program at her children's school in the Pilsen neighborhood. After 3 years of dedicated service, she became the program's coordinator, a role she carries out with deep commitment and heart. And I know she does because we work together at the Resurrection Project. In this position, Alma works to support both students and educators in the classroom while also focusing on empowering fellow parents and strengthening community ties. Juan Pablo Esquivel is a passionate special education teacher and advocate for equity, known for cross-disciplinary curricula paired with initiative teaching and transformational leadership in community initiatives. Recognized by the Illinois Board of Education with those who excel and the Teacher of the Year special recognition awards. Their dedication to engaging student success is demonstrated in ensuring students are achieving their individual learning objectives. Currently, they serve on the Noble Alumni Board of Phi Iota Alpha's National Board of Trustees and participate in Advanced Illinois Teacher Advisory Council, among other roles. Their participation in the first cohort of the Liberated Educators Collaborative and the Latino Forum's Multicultural Leadership Academy 2024, which is where I met him, highlights their ongoing commitment to professional growth and community building with education. Juan has been a teacher leader with Educators for Excellence since 2023 and was a critical member of the E4E working group to shape all our educators' agenda for the Chicago Board of Education. Welcome, Alma and Juan.
Thanks to Kids for Chicago for the invitation.
Hi, nice to see you both.
Nice to see y'all.
Okay,
Hi,
and
everyone.
I'll start the first question to Alma, right? From your perspective, right, as a CPS parent and of two and a parent mentor coordinator in your school building every single day, what are some of the ways you've seen immigration fears showing up at the at school this school year?
Well, both as a mother and as a coordinator, I have the same feelings: fear, frustration, and a lot of sadness. And I know that I was not the only mother in that situation, but thousands of families not knowing what will happen to themselves and their children if they were arrested. I remember one day my children came to me with questions like, why are some classmates afraid to come to class? And that was terrible for me. Also, to see teachers and administrators really concerned about low attendance. But more importantly, maintain the safety of the students, since regardless of immigration status in one way or other, most students are suffering the consequences since this past January with the new administration.
Thank you, Alma. And thank you for sharing your perspective as a mom and as a parent mentor.
Yeah.
Juan, in your classroom, what are you hearing or noticing from students and parents when it comes to concerns about deportations or immigration enforcement?
What I hear the most, I think, is the uncertainty, quiet worry from students, and direct fear from parents during like meetings. Students won't always say it, but you could see it, you could feel it, you could feel that tension among the students in the classroom. I remember the day after our president got elected, a lot of students showed up to that classroom asking me, "Oh, are we safe? Are my parents gonna be deported?" And the thing is, like, we want the students to feel safe, supported in the classroom, and we also gotta like make sure they're able to learn. So those are, I think, for educators, for teachers, that was a tough day, regardless of like political beliefs, having those conversations, being prepared to have those conversations in the classroom.
Thank you, Juan. Alma, back to you. Have you seen families hold back from enrolling their children, skip school events, or keep their kids home? Or what are you hearing at the school?
I have not really seen the lack of registrations, but as the weeks have passed, parents have become a little bit more comfortable with taking their children to school. But I can still see the fear of attending some events, especially if they are outside of school. So our children continue to be affected.
Thank you, Alma. I know, Juan, you mentioned, right, like students were carrying this fear since Trump was elected. How does it show up in their learning? Are you seeing changes in participation? Are they having a harder time focusing, or is it impacting their behavior in the classroom?
Absolutely. For students, it shows up like withdrawer, quieter, distracted, sometimes anxious, sometimes angry. Like these feelings manifest in different ways in the classrooms. I had students who used to be involved in class discussions actively, all of a sudden like just change their demeanor. You see there's something like that anxiety in them. They won't name it at the top of the head, but there's something that's like pending in their head outside like the school.
Oops, sorry, I was muted. Thank you for sharing, Juan. And I know students face a lot of uncertainty, and families face a lot of uncertainty and fears. Alma, in your opinion, what kind of support are families asking for most right now? Whether that's like resources on legal information, mental health support, or just someone to talk to?
Well, I said all three. I think we all need someone to talk to. In terms of legal information, we have seen a great increase in information about immigrant rights. That is why today I recognize the great work of several organizations, such as the Resurrection Project, in bringing Now Your Rights workshops to our schools, and also school administrations for having as many resources as possible for families. But still, the most important thing I hear within the school is social emotional support, not only for the students, families, and some of the teachers. And let me tell you about these much needed resources I don't see coming yet. That what is the importance of these webinars that give us a space for our voices to be here. Thank you. Kids First Chicago.
Gracias. Thank you, Alma.
Mhm.
Back to you,
Great.
Juan. What makes it hard for schools to fully support immigrant students? Is it language gaps or barriers, not enough counselors, or something else? What would make a difference?
I think it's a combination of things. Yes, language barriers sometimes can be tough, but it's more than that. I think teachers want to help aren't always trained in trauma informed practices, maybe not up to date with the policies, with the changes. Um, I believe every teacher is trying to help, but the information sometimes there's a lot of misinformation spread online on the news. I think there's sometimes more panic than actual like wraparound services to help support immediate need. I think what will make a real difference is funding for more bilingual mental health professionals, and not just in Spanish, but like we have groups with different languages who are sometimes underrepresented in schools that it might help. It might even be one student who speaks that one language, but having someone who could be an ally to that student goes above and beyond.
Thank you, Juan. And I know the misinformation and the rumors, right? It's sometimes really hard to handle, especially on social media or just in the community. Alma, we heard that fear and confusion are spreading, right? In part because of rumors and misinformation, whether it's about ICE at schools or families receiving threatening notices. What kinds of misinformation or stories are you hearing from parents right now? And how is that shaping their decision about school?
Unfortunately, missing the information is everywhere, that you say, Marta, especially in social media. Not only give gives unreliable information, but also show us real stories because we are really living a sad reality. And again, I think this affects the students and families emotionally, which consequently lowers, lowers the academic performance.
Thank you, Alma. Back to you, Juan. CPS says attendance dips can be due to a lot of different factors, right? It could be the weather. We do live in Chicago, illnesses, etc. But from what you're seeing, how much is immigration a fear driving absences at your school?
I think it's a factor, especially after like at the beginning we had a story about like a ICE agent around elementary school in the southwest part of the Chicago. So that right after the new president became president, it did struck fear in the community. You get me? And that along with a lot of misinformation just creates that fear. Sometimes parents sometimes parents like share that information and the legal status with other parents, and then those rumors spread. And I think it is a factor, not just necessarily because the student legal status, but sometimes if a student has a parent who might not feel safe because of work or anything, sometimes they gotta stay back and help with certain things at home.
Thank you for sharing. And then this question would be for both of you, and I'll start with Alma. Right, thinking big picture for a moment. What do students really need the most to feel safe, supported, and able to thrive at school right now?
Of course, as I have said in this conversation, we need all students, teachers, and other school personnel in terms of emotional support so that there is more empathy and understanding for the families. But from the bottom of my heart, I believe they need a relaxed environment where they feel more secure and happy. Thank you.
Gracias, Alma. Thank you. Do you want me to repeat the question, Juan?
No, I think I have it. Um, I think students and the community they need to know not just hope, but that the school, that the institution is a safe place. That means visible support, staff who speak the language of the student, posters or flyers with immigration rights. Those QR codes help a lot. Once you scan, you get the information on your phone. It's easy access in today's day to share those resources. Access to mental health services, wraparound services, and just sometimes even just having a trusted adult or staff member at the school to share about what's going on. I think they need school leaders to name the issue and not tiptoe around it, so families are able to be aware and seek that to stand with each other. You get me? Like in these times, just feeling safe is not just physical, but it's also emotional, cultural, sometimes legal. We have to show up in all fronts. I think that's the important thing. Show up in all fronts and not just do it because it's the trendy thing to do it.
Thank you, Juan y Alma, for all your thoughtful answers, and thank you for participating in the panel. And I'll pass it back to Hal now, I think.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Martha. Thank you, Alma. Thank you, Juan.
Thank
It's
you.
an important conversation. Before we shift to our next topic, we want to hear from all of you. So we're going to launch a short poll to get a sense of what stood out most to you during this last segment and how you're thinking about the impact of immigration actions on students and families here in Chicago. So to walk us through the poll, I'm going to turn it over to Jennifer Kermes, who is the Director of Policy at Advance Illinois. So Jen, thank you so much for being with us, and I'll let you take it away.
Happy to be here, and it was so great to hear from you, Alma and Juan, and now we want to hear from everyone else. So the poll questions, I think there it is right there. So the first question is, of the immigration issues you heard today, what concerns you the most? There are 4 questions, So as you finish the first one, you can scroll down and answer all the rest. No. Hal, I can't see the poll anymore. Is it still up?
It is.
Okay.
Let's see. I'm going to relaunch it. If I relaunch it, we might lose the responses. So we could probably just go I think just go to the next question and we'll see. Can folks see it? Only got 13 responses, so maybe I will relaunch it. All right.
Okay, so sorry about the technical difficulty if you had some. Hopefully you can see the poll now. And all 4 questions are there for you to answer. So the first asks you about issues of concern. The second about the kinds of supports Chicago Public Schools families need right now. The third about how you feel Chicago Public Schools is doing to support immigrant families. And the fourth asks you if there are any actions you would be personally interested in taking. So if you haven't already, please go ahead and respond to the poll.
Minute. Got about 54 responses, which is great.
Great. Thank you to everyone who has already responded. And if you're still working on it, you have a few more seconds to finish up.
Any problems, you can also use this QR code. That's helpful. poll. And then share the results. Jen, can you see those?
Yes, I can. Thank you. So in terms of issues of concern, really there are some votes for every single issue on here, and certainly, oh, sorry, sorry. Yes. So there are some, the concern across the board, but certainly fear of deportation and raids being the most significant. As far as question 2 goes, the kinds of supports that CPS families need, again, here the answers are spread, but the 2 highest vote getters were legal support and know your rights information, and more clarity from Chicago Public Schools about what schools can and cannot do. Most people thought that Chicago Public Schools was somewhat doing enough to support families right now. So that got 47% of the respondents, 21% for yes, and 16% for no. And then lastly, it looks like there are some folks who would be interested in each of the activities mentioned, but the most significant vote getter was sharing information with friends, family, and neighbors. So thank you again to everyone who participated in those polls. It's great to hear from you and know where you are, and we'll do another poll after this next section.
Thank you, Jen. Thank you to everyone who responded to the first poll. And again, thank you to our panelists and to Martha for moderating such an important discussion. We are now going to shift to the second half of tonight's program, which focuses on the federal government's ongoing attacks on race-conscious programs, specifically how those attacks are putting CPS's Black Student Success Plan at risk. So we are joined by Daniel Nello, the CEO of Kids for Chicago. He's going to walk through what the plan actually does, why it matters for Black students across Chicago, and what's at stake if the work gets stalled or stripped back. Daniel, over to you.
Thanks, Hal. Can you hear me? All good? Thumbs up? All right. Hi, everyone. Thanks. That was definitely hearing kind of the perspectives from the families, like just the teachers on immigration was potent. I also think, I hope that folks who are on the call can see the connective tissue between both of these issues, because there is a very real effort afoot that's being driven by the federal government that is unique in our time, right? It's something that people before us have seen, and the Black Student Success Plan is no different in a lot of ways in terms of the attacks that have come on it. So what to know? We're going to spend some time talking about the Black Student Success Plan, how it came to be, some things that happened in LA that are important to know about, but just some basic facts about Chicago. A third of the students in CPS are Black students today. That was a much larger number starting in the 60s. It was as much as half the student body at one point. And they have faced consistently the widest gaps in reading, math, graduation rates, higher discipline rates. And frankly, when you talk about the achievement gap, which is a different distance between white students, Asian students, Latino students, and Black students, the Black students have often been at the bottom of the achievement gap for a century. And if you actually know the history in Chicago and you start to go back and dig, the last time we didn't have an achievement gap between Black students and white students was in the 1920s. And it didn't exist. And you can actually find teachers who are speaking to the fact that they can't see a difference academically between the Black students and the white students at all. And yet then we have 100 years of, and we're not here by accident, you have 100 years of different things that have happened: structural racism, disinvestment in communities, a whole host of policies that really kind of made it very difficult for Black families to live here, to educate here, to get educated here. You layer onto that the civil rights movement, Brown v. Board of Education, the firing of Black. There's a whole long legacy of why we are where we are today. And part of CPS's pivot was to finally, in this most recent year, which I think a lot of us were celebrating, was to recognize that history has made a huge difference for Black families and Black students in this city. And so the district made a commitment. They came up with a very targeted plan. And that plan, the Black Student Success Plan, was going to live within the new strategic plan that they're launching, or that they launched in 2024. And the focus was really to move away from this one size fits none, and to address Black students specifically with targeted interventions that could help them succeed. It matters, and it also matters that it doesn't just sit on a shelf. So it started with an effort to launch a working group. And what's important here is that none of this stuff was built by central office or an ivory tower. There weren't consultants. There was a 60-person working group that was put together. There was a number of folks involved, but kudos to CPS. Civic Consulting Alliance was part of that. And they met for months. They met for about 4 months, where they would come together, they'd analyze the data that was available to them, and they would think about how you're going to shape the Black Student Success Plan ultimately, based on the recommendations that they were getting from that committee. There was a whole host of different outreach, 9 in-person and 1 virtual forum. There was 1,200 people that participated across that. There's over 800 written suggestions that came in. They had targeted focus groups across 25 small group sessions. And all of that feedback was critical, but they also allowed the public to respond to the final plan itself and provide additional feedback, which they then used to incorporate into the plan that they released. So at the end of the day, if you wonder who shaped this plan, the answer is the people of Chicago. Go ahead, Al. Another important fact about this is that CPS was not required by law to create a Black Student Success Plan. The district, however, based on the elected school board law, is responsible and required to have a Black Student Achievement Committee, which is, its purpose is to essentially monitor and hold public meetings and report out on the success or struggles of Black students, in particular reporting into the elected school board. But the plan, I mean, you can have a committee, but if you don't have a plan with a committee, what's the committee going to lead to anyway? So kudos again to CPS for saying, hey, we need to give this committee a plan to work from. This committee ultimately has to meet regularly. They have to track progress. And what it does is it gives families and advocates a real way to keep the work centered, right? In the past, when we have had these kind of things that are focused on specific populations, without anything that's kind of formalized, it's very easy for those things to get lost track of and to get kind of pushed aside. So even though this plan wasn't a CPS decision, at the end of the day, the committee provides a formal lever to make sure that the district implements this plan. Or it wasn't a CPS formalized requirement. Go ahead, Hal. So what's in the plan in terms of goals? So this is in the 5-year strategic plan as well that carries over into the plan. But what you saw were a couple of specific goals that are all about how do you actually set up Black students for success and acknowledge the history of what's put them in the position that they are in Chicago. And these goals absolutely come from the committee's work with, they're from youth, teachers, parents, all coming together and saying, these are the things that we need to happen. The first big thing, I mean, at the end of the day, how do you ensure, I mean, actually, I'll look at the bottom one here, increasing the number of Black students who report on a strong sense of belonging in school climate. And I'll just say, like, all 3 of the ones above it really are the drivers to get there, right? You need to have there's research that backs every one of these things, but you need to have educators that look like the kids. Like, that's been proven to not only help Black students, but every other student, just to have a Black male teacher in the core of teachers that are teaching them. Diversity in the classroom matters, and that research continues to show that. So that's one. You have to not have disciplinary practices that disadvantage or overemphasize and exit Black students. So how do you make sure that the policies that we have in terms of discipline aren't pushing kids out? And then you have to make sure that the curriculum is, kids can see themselves in the actual curriculum, the stuff that they're studying. And I have a very personal sentiment about that because that was not my experience as a kid. It wasn't my brother's experience as a kid, and it matters, right? To just see yourself in what you're being taught. And I think that applies to everyone. But I think in this particular case, they're like, how do we emphasize the Black student experience and make sure that that is embedded? And that's going to extend and radiate outward to other populations as well. Go ahead, Al. So the corresponding plan for this is essentially one-to-one aligned to those things that we just went through. The first one I'll talk to is just teaching and curriculum. So CPS is committed to training teachers and staff on culturally responsive practices. And that means more than just teaching during Black History, right? February can't be the only time you learn about Black history, because Black history is just history. All of us should be learning about it, especially like the history of Chicago and some of the things I talked about before about why we are where we are, because we often tend to blame the students sometimes for where they're at without taking into account the history that puts them in the position that they're in. Centering Black identity, culture, student voice, and just making sure that's year round was super important. And also making sure that there's challenges to anti-Black bias when it shows up in the classroom. The second piece, just this resource equity piece, is making sure that there's more funding to support counselors, mental health supports, and all the things that need to go into making sure Black students have what they need to be successful and to go after the greatest inequities that have existed in our system for a long time. Third, we need a pipeline of Black educators, and that means recruiting in places like historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs. It means partnering with local colleges to look for Black educators that can come out of those spaces. And it means looking at grow your own initiatives to create pathways for Black educators here in the city. And then finally, the district needs to keep working with parents, students, and communities to refine the plan, which they've been doing a really good job of, but this means more listening sessions. It means continuous, open, and accountable kind of dialogue with the community. And while that road is what we've laid out, the question now is, how do we make sure the district follows through on this? And ultimately, will they be able to follow through? Because there are some other factors that are playing a role now, as you know, the federal stuff. Go ahead, Al. So this is just a quick timeline snapshot of where we are and how this thing has come together. So the working group I talked about formed back in the fall. In September, the 5-year plan was published, and it had a call out for the Black Student Success Plan. The Black Student Success Plan was released officially in February, and the Black Student Achievement Committee was announced and is now being pulled together. The committee still needs to be fully staffed, and it needs to include real community voices. So I think people here who are interested should be raising their hands. It still needs to hold its first public meeting. And to make this real, CPS is going to have to commit actual dollars to it. I think when we go back to those goals, those metrics we talked about, they're going to have to create baselines so we know where things are today, so that when you're talking about doubling the number of Black educators or the retention rates, like we know exactly what that means and the public can hold them accountable. And then just being transparent about those data and how we're moving as the plan progresses will be really important. So there is an important story that is incredibly relevant to this that starts in 2021. And it's relevant because it is literally like verbatim where Chicago is where LA was with its Black Student Achievement Plan back in 21. And what the Black Student Achievement Plan was a very targeted effort that Los Angeles was coming into its own on. They invested $120 million specifically to support Black students in a targeted way. And they were looking at 50 plus schools in LA where they focused on two key criteria. Did it have a high population of Black students? And did they see things like higher suspension rates, poor school climate survey results, test score results that were not that great? And those two factors were really why they invested or where they invested. And what came with those investments was more counselors, climate coaches, restorative justice teachers, and culturally relevant curriculum and training, just like we were talking about in the Black Student Success Plan for Chicago. And they saw early progress. I mean, at the end of the day, it was working. They saw improved test scores. They saw a stronger sense of belonging, which, if you remember back to the previous slide, was like the fourth item, right? Like where are the Black students? And the students themselves reported on feeling like more adults cared about them or were checking in on them on a regular basis. But in 2023, the same group, Parents Defending Education, which is a Virginia-based group that doesn't actually have any members in Chicago. I don't know about LA, but I've looked in Chicago. They're the same group that came and filed a complaint against the Black Student Success Plan here in Chicago. They were the group that back in 23 filed a complaint against LA. And the civil rights complaint was then picked up by the Department of Education's Office of Civil Rights. For those of you who don't know, the Office of Civil Rights are the ones who released this Dear Colleague letter about affirmative action in schools. And essentially they threatened the district to say, hey, if you're doing something here that is specifically about race, and we're gonna investigate you. In LA, in response, and one of these things that I think we need to think about is anticipatory compliance, like reacting in advance before there's any legal reason to react. They removed the race component, the criteria. They said, okay, we're going to take that out. That'll relinquish this pressure from the Office of Civil Rights that's on us. And now the schools will be selected based on general indicators. And so they moved in that direction. And unfortunately, what ended up happening is what one would fear when you take your focus off, right? The funding amount stayed the same, this $120 million, but the impact ended up being diluted, right? Because now they're stretching those dollars across more schools and more students, and they're based on general need. But in some cases, that specificity is not addressing the issue that Black students have been having for a century. And the plan right now, the focus of the plan is struggling. A community survey that came out afterwards showed that half of the Black students no longer felt that they were receiving the dedicated supports that they had been and the service that they had been. They didn't feel as seen. And as soon as LA removed the Black in the plan, the Black Student Achievement Plan, and just made it a student achievement plan, they removed their complaint and their investigation after the district. And so here's why it matters for Chicago. I think legal pressure is very real, or we think legal pressure is very real. LA had to overhaul their program to get away from this kind of, they were under the threat of federal dollars. In this case, we're talking about Chicago's CPS's funding, but CPS is now facing the same kind of investigation. And it was triggered by the same group, this Parents Defending Education, which again, doesn't have a parent in Chicago, and similar claims. And the Office of Civil Rights has picked it up. And there's actually been other similar cases that have been emerging across the country for similar types of targeted programming. I think when you take away the focus of something like this, you have the risk of drift in your efforts, right? When there's the race-specific language was removed in LA, it meant that the Black students didn't get the supports that they had that were targeted to them. And the impact ultimately means it was weakened for Black students. And finally, I think community voice has made a difference. In LA, students and families, they didn't just roll over. They were the ones who came and organized and protested and said, keep the Black or the B in the Black Student Achievement Plan, track the money, show us that Black students are still benefiting. Even if the legal language has changed, how are we going to make sure you're accountable to the Black students that you said you were going to serve, given the history of LA, which is very similar to Chicago? So I think those are all really important for us as we think about what's next in Chicago.
Thank you, Daniel, for the overview as well as for laying out what's at stake here in Chicago. We're going to now hear directly from a few folks who've been part of the development of the Life Success Plan. So I'm excited to pass things over to Karina Dema, who is the Senior Organizer at Educators for Excellence Chicago. She's also a passionate advocate. So she'll be moderating our next panel, which is focused on the school level implications on the federal attacks on CPS's Black Student Success Plan. Karina, thank you for leading this conversation. I'll turn it over to you.
Thanks, Hal, and thanks, Daniel, for that very thoughtful presentation. Now I have the distinct pleasure myself of introducing our parent and our educator speaker. So first I'll introduce Ms. Darlene O'Banner. She has been a proud Inglewood resident for over 50 years and is a lifelong product of Chicago Public Schools, same. Having attended Luke O'Toole Elementary and Gage Park High School, she also attended Jackson State University. A mother, a grandmother, and a great-grandmother, Darlene is deeply committed to her community and to public education. She currently serves on the LSC and Parent Advisory Council at Earl Elementary, chairs the Inglewood Community Action Council, and is a former chair of CPS's Policy Committee for Early Childhood. She is also a CPS Parent Ambassador, a volunteer facilitator at the Parent University Training Center at Earl, a member of the steering committee for the new Inglewood High School, and a member of the Kids First Chicago Parent Advisory Board. Darlene brings over 40 years of work experience and a powerful voice for families and equity in education. She is very busy. Welcome, Ms. O'Banner. Secondly, I would like to introduce Sinitra Moore. Sinitra is a dedicated and experienced educator with a career spanning 16 years, primarily focused on empowering students in underserved communities. A lifelong resident of Chicago's West Side, Moore's educational journey began at Sayre Lake Academy, followed by Lane Tech High School and undergraduate studies at Northeastern Illinois University. Her commitment to education has seen her serve in Title I schools across Chicago and inner city New Orleans, where she has consistently championed student achievement. Moore is known for her unwavering willingness to advocate for students, parents, teachers, and educational support staff, believing strongly in a collaborative approach to foster a supportive learning environment. Currently, she continues to impact education as a mentor teacher and a member of the Educators for Excellence advocacy team housed within McNair Elementary. She brings a wealth of experience, including over a decade of pedagogical content, knowledge, and understanding of diverse learners, and an insight on educational inequalities. Such a pleasure and an honor to be in the room with you two ladies today. Welcome. Okay. Okay, well, let's kick it off. I'm just going to open it up to both of you. Maybe Ms. O'Banner, you would like to take this one first. Chicago just launched this Black Student Success Plan. Why do you believe, each of you, why do you believe it's essential that the district have a plan focused specifically on Black students?
Thank you for the opportunity, Karina. Well, as a Black parent in the community, advocating for wonderful pre-K students at Earl STEM, pre-K through 8, I see firsthand the systematic challenges of Black children that's facing Chicago public schools that propose that the Black Student Plan, that we call it the BSSP, is critical, long overdue towards equity, and the community is counting on it. This is something that we really, really need, and I have to stand firm to say this is just a plan. No type of budgeting, no type of money, anything was ever allocated to the plan. This is like just a plan.
Well, Ms. Banner, I think you're frozen. While we wait for that connection to be reestablished, Sinitra, would you like to pick up that question? Would you like me to repeat it?
Oh, no, I have it. I think it's very essential for Chicago to have a plan specifically for Black students because they continue to face inequalities in educational opportunities and outcomes. Addressing historical disadvantages and systematic issues is very crucial. For decades, Black students in CPS have largely attended highly segregated schools. These Black students have lower proficiency in CPS schools than any other group. Schools serving majority Black students are closed at a much higher rate, 71% compared to 4% or lower than students of Caucasian or Asian descent. The lack of students' access to efficient technology, top-tier curriculum, and hands-on resources is displayed in racial equity gaps. For example, we have math proficiency is 7% versus 72% compared to Caucasian and Asian counterparts. Reading proficiency, 11% versus 64%. Access to algebra is 23% versus 71%. Access to AP courses, 18% compared to 74%. And when we look at access to teachers who have 5 or more years of experience, that's 62% versus 91%. These numbers are significantly different than one another. So the equity gap within educational facilities for Black students has been an ongoing conversation with no action. This plan responds to data and historical inequities, and this is why I believe that this plan is very essential in CPS schools.
Thank you, Sunita. That was, I love all of the data that you threw in there for us to get more of a perspective. Ms. O'Banner, if your connection is improved, I would love to kick it back to you. There we are. Hello. So I'm sorry you got froze for a minute, but you're back. And I wanted to kick it back to you anyways and ask you, because you've seen these disparities firsthand, whether it's in school discipline or access to strong teachers or kids being in safe modern buildings. Could you share an example or two of the challenges you've witnessed and what kind of real day-to-day changes do you think the Black Student Success Plan could bring to families?
Yes, thank you. I've seen firsthand the discipline for Black boys and the struggle to extract and retain strong Black teachers in our schools. Many Black students is still in aging and are still in underfunded buildings. Again, I call it the BSSP, which is the Black Student Success Plan. It could be fairness to discipline, less punitive measurement, more restorative practice, keeping the kids in the class, stronger teachers, more Black teachers, and responsible to belongs and confidence. That means partners to get family in schools for different events. That's for students to see teachers that look like them.
Yes, thank you. I definitely agree on that piece. It's important to see yourself and the people that are standing in front of you and educating you. Sunisha, I'm going to come back to you. In the classroom, what would a fully funded, fully supported Black Student Success Plan look like for teaching and learning?
Great question. In the classroom, a fully funded Black Student Success Plan would mean that teachers will use lesson plans and materials that will celebrate Black history and other unrecognized cultures. We will also have high quality curriculum for all students, making learning more engaging and relatable. It would also ensure that students get the extra help that they need, such as through tutors, interventionists, and mentors, which would then lead to fewer behavior issues and better grades for students. Can't forget about the staff. So we need ongoing training for staff members on how to create welcoming and fair classrooms where students feel truly supported and empowered to excel. This is what I think a fully funded and fully supported Black Student Success Plan would look like within a CPS school.
I like the way that looks through your eyes, Sunita. Ms. O'Banner, do you think most parents and community members are aware of the Black Student Success Plan? And if not, what can we do to change that? Why does it matter that more people know about it?
Yes, we definitely need to get more communication out, establish a LSC, a liaison, a dedicated point person to keep each school for the BSSP implementation, hold regular meetings and forums, accessible meetings in our neighborhoods and community for updates and feedback. We also need to empower the students, union and youth advisory to give the students a forum platform, because we need to hear a platform where the students can speak. I served on that committee with the Black Student Success. You need to create a transparent data dashboard, a public track for the Black Student Success, the progress to build the trust, and to invest in parent leadership development and train parent to be effective advocates, train parents to be advocate, because just recently we just found out that they don't cut the parent mentor in the school. So see, that's something that's needed across the board, which is called to the core.
Yes, yeah, I agree. would love it if more people knew what we are trying to defend here. Sinitra, I'm going to revisit something that Daniel talked about in his presentation. So that Los Angeles situation, how Los Angeles reworked its Black Student Achievement Plan after facing legal challenges, right? So it broadened it to serve all students, not just Black students. And some saw that as a necessary legal move, but others felt like it diluted the focus and intent of the original plan. So what's your take? Is it important to keep the Black in the Black Student Achievement Plan and in the Black Student Achievement Committee?
Yes, absolutely. That's a great question. Let's be clear, right? All students deserve support. However, a blanket approach could miss the essential point of directly tackling systematic barriers that impact Black student achievement. So by maintaining the integrity of the Black Student Achievement Plan and the title, a clear message to our Black students that they matter is very important. Actually, the student union in LA isn't backing down. They are actually continuing to campaign against the change with their own initiative, Put the Black back in Black student achievement. Lastly, we all know when we say programs for all students, it's the Black and brown students who fall through the cracks. And that is why I think it should not be reworked or broaden the scope of what the initiative stands for and how it is worded.
Thank you for that, Snitra. I'm going to pivot back to Ms. O'Banner. Given your years of dedication, service, experience, and work with the working groups to achieve this Black Student Success Plan, people are questioning, right? Some people will question, why do we need a plan specifically for Black students? And how do you explain how it matters? Why it matters, and what do you share from your own experience, your wealth of experience, to help others understand this?
Well, we're not asking for special treatment. What we're asking for is equitable treatment with urgent needs. The suspension rate. Can we measure who's getting suspended due to implement bias, not worse behavior? This plan will correct all of that. The decrease in enrollment, Black families leaving CPS if the needs are not met. So the plan, this is something that's much needed. And again, as I stated, we're not asking for special treatment. We're just asking for equitable treatment and an urgent need.
Yes, thank you for that. Sinitra, sort of in the same vein of what we were thinking through earlier, like what would it look like? Can you speak a little bit more about like implementation? A plan is only as strong as it's carried out, right? From your perspective, what kinds of support, like teacher training, staffing, funding, what kinds of support are most essential to actually bring the Black Student Success Plan to life in classrooms? What would it take to make it feel real and not just a plan in name only?
Well, we all know training is required, right? So consistent and ongoing racial equity training is much needed. Increase Black teachers and staff, support staff. We need flexible funding that directly reaches schools for culturally relevant resources and programs that are held at the school level. We need strong partnerships with Black communities and organizations and families in and outside of the school. We need to ensure there's real accountability, right? So we need measures, we need protocols, things in place. So providing annual public reports on the plan's progress, establishing community advisory committees, right? To provide ongoing feedback, maybe monitoring the implementation and hold CPS accountable the whole entire time. We need to maybe require individual schools to develop and report on their localized Black student union. That will help everyone. They may have different perspectives that we can tap into within their students and then, carry it over to other schools. And a real timeline for the budget dedicated for this work is crucial. We need to establish non-negotiable budgets for Black Student Achievement Plan. The budget needs to outline specific initiatives for the program and staffing required to implement the plan's objective. That's what I feel will make it feel real and not just a document that's sitting on the shelf.
Yes, that sounds right to me. Considering that we're coming close to time, I'm going to ask one more question of both of you, and I'll ask Ms. O'Banner to answer it first. Looking ahead, what can parents and educators do together, right? Like most of the people in these rooms, right, in this room right now. What can we do together inside and outside schools to make the Black Student Success Plan a reality for Chicago students?
Make a success is to train parents to be effective advocates. When a child rarely see a teacher that look like them and their history isn't taught in a daily message, their identity is not valued. So the only thing again, it's just really, it starts at home, and it's just for each to be implemented. And we just do not need to lose this plan. This plan it will correct all of that. Everything that we have talked about, this plan is the answer to what we've been looking for a long time.
Thank you. Sinitra, what's your take?
So as we know, communication is key. So I would say we need to collaborate regularly, communicating about the impact the plan is making on students' progress and any shifts that need to occur. We need to ensure that the plan's goals are integrated into daily classroom practices and home life to make it sticky, to make it relevant, to show the importance of it, that we're using the plan and how necessary it is for students. We need to work together to advocate for sustained funding and resources. That has to be ongoing. It's not a one-time thing, as we know, right? Students need resources every single day. They need these resources for the next school year, right? We can't get it for one school year and then not receive it ongoing. And then we need to actively participate in school-based committees and community panels to monitor the plan's implementation. Because we know it without any monitoring, then once again, it goes back to just a plan sitting on the shelf. So that's what I think parents and educators can do to make the plan a more of a reality and something that we can actually watch and see flourish and grow.
Thank you so much. I want to thank both of you so much for sharing, your experiences. I'm going and having this conversation with us. I'm dropping in the chat here a call to action if you feel so moved. This is also probably going to go out in the after event email. This is around the Black Student Achievement Committee that Daniel so beautifully explained, and asking that this committee be fully formed so they can start implementing the plan right away, which is what we're all anxious for them to do. Again, thank you, Sinitra and Ms. O'Banner, and back to Hal. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Karina, for moderating. Thank you to Ms. O'Banner. Thank you to Sinitra for your insight and your perspectives and your truth as well. So before we close out the evening, we are going to ask you again to hear from you. So we've got a final poll that's going to help us understand what resonated and where people are still hoping to learn or to take action. So once again, I'm going to turn it over to Jen from Advanced Illinois to walk us through the questions. Jen, I'm going to launch the poll and you can take it away.
Okay. Thanks again to the panel for those great insights. Now we're going to try to get some insights from everyone on the call. This poll is also 4 questions, just like the last one. So you'll answer all of them and then submit. If you can't see them all, you can just use the scroll bar to scroll down. The first question is, what concerns you most about the current state of the Black Student Success Plan? After that, we're going to ask you what's one area where you want to see urgent change for Black students in Chicago Public Schools? What are some actions you're willing to take? And the final question, should Chicago Public Schools prioritize protecting this plan even amid the federal threats to remove funding? So we'll give a few minutes to get those responses in, and then we'll review the results.
Next time I know we need to have some poll taking music. It's a good lesson.
I would sing, but I don't think anybody wants that.
We'll let it go for another 45 seconds or so. I'll give it a full 3 minutes. But thank you all for sharing your perspective. This is really helpful. Go ahead and end the poll. Still have some responses coming in, but ended it. And then Jen, can you see the results?
Yes, all right. Thanks again, everyone. So it looks here in terms of concerns like the legal and political threats are the greatest concern right now, but the need for more transparency and funding are close behind. In terms of areas for change, there are some votes for every single category here, with the two final choices being the highest vote getters, and those would be supporting students' mental health and identity and engaging families in decisions. Some actions we'd be willing to take. Looks like a nice, practically even split here. So folks willing to learn, share what they've learned with their communities, call on CPS to give more updates and progress reports, and joining into advocacy around funding. And then lastly, should CPS keep prioritizing this plan in spite of the federal threats specific to funding? And 71% of us say yes, absolutely, with another 13% saying maybe, it depends on the risk, only 2% saying no, and 13% unsure. So a big majority in favor of yes, absolutely, let's protect this plan. Let's do right by our Black students and end the generations of inequities.
Thank you so much, Jen. And thank you to everyone here who participated in tonight's poll. It is always very valuable to hear directly from this community about what you're seeing, what concerns you, and how you're thinking about taking action. So before we officially wrap up tonight's program, I want to hand it over to my colleague, Nida De La Rosa, our Associate Director of Organizing and Community Partnerships here at Kids for Chicago. Nida is going to help close us out and share a few next steps on how you can stay connected and stay involved. Nida, I'll turn over to you.
Thank you, Hal. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being with us tonight. As usual, tomorrow you'll get an email with tonight's recordings, the link to tonight's presentation, and links to resources we shared this evening. In that same follow-up, we will invite you to stay connected Over the summer, we're mobilizing around 2 priorities. 1, more dollars for schools doing the heavy lift with immigrant families. And 2, real money and real accountability behind the Black Student Success Plan. Supporting those efforts is how we translate tonight's learning into action. Finally, a giant thank you. Tonight's program isn't the work of just one group. It's parents who showed up after a long day. It's educators giving voice to what they see in classrooms, community partners who lend expertise, and advocates who keep pushing for change. Big thanks to the Resurrection Project, Educators for Excellence Chicago, and Advance Illinois for co-hosting tonight, and to Education Council and the National Parents Union for supporting our first webinar earlier this month. And to every parent, educator, and community member on screen and in the chat, thank you for being here. We're proud to stand with you. I know it's overtime. Thank you so much for hanging in there with us. I promise to get you out of here in the next couple of minutes. We do ask that and really appreciate if you could take just a minute or two to complete our short survey. Your feedback helps us understand what landed, what could be clearer, and how we can make future webinars even more useful and relevant for you. You could either scan the QR code that you see on the screen, or you can click on the link that we have just dropped in the chat. Your responses are completely anonymous. We'll use what you share to shape future programs, topics, and the way we present information. So thank you in advance for taking a moment to let us know what you thought. Okay. All right. As we close out tonight's conversation, I want to say thank you again, truly, to everyone who joined us this evening. Thank you to our amazing panelists for sharing your insights, your stories, and your lived experience. Your voices made this conversation real. We thank you to our partners, Resurrection Project, Advance Illinois, Educators for Excellence Chicago, for making tonight's program possible. And thank you to all of you, our community, for showing up. We know these issues are heavy, they're complicated, but your presence tonight is proof that people care deeply about protecting our schools and our students. Kids for Chicago will follow up by email with resources, recordings, and more ways to stay connected. Take care of yourselves and each other. We'll see you again soon.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful evening.